Ebola cases in West Africa approach 9,000 as officials warn the disease continues to spread.
Our data shows that cases are doubling every 4 weeks.
Nearly 100 British military medics have arrived in Sierra Leone to join the desperate fight against the deadly virus.
We're ready to go and do this task now, and I think you can hear that the morale amongst the troops is high.
Also tonight, Cameron takes his immigration pledge to the by-election campaign in Rochester.
The consultant sacked after a hospital found 27 cancer patients suffered serious harm in his care.
And a remarkable vista of remembrance, the Queen and Prince Philip among the poppies at the Tower of London.
This is ITV News at 6:30 with Mary Nightingale and Alistair Stewart.
Good evening. Britain's response to the spread of Ebola in West Africa moved up a gear today as a team of nearly 100 army medics touched down in Sierra Leone. They joined 40 British soldiers already deployed there, with many more due to arrive next month.
The World Health Organization confirmed the number of recorded deaths from the virus will pass 4,500 this week. In the United States, the hospital where 2 nurses have been infected whilst treating an Ebola patient tonight admitted making mistakes. More on that in a moment, but first this report from our correspondent, Dan Rivers.
It is the single biggest deployment of British military personnel so far in the fight against Ebola. Medics and logistics experts from Tutu Field Hospital arriving in Sierra Leone today. They will be staffing a treatment centre for infected doctors and nurses, bringing vital supplies for this battle against an invisible enemy, which has already claimed more than 4,000 victims.
We've been held at readiness for 20 months to go anywhere on contingency operations, and so all we've needed is top-up training really for this specific operation.
As they arrived, an Air France flight was being quarantined in Madrid after a passenger from Nigeria came down with a fever. He was rushed to hospital amid stringent biosecurity, the same hospital where a Spanish nurse continues to be treated for the virus. But it is in West Africa where the remorseless spread of Ebola is resulting in deaths every hour, to the horror of those who've devoted their lives to the continent.
In West Africa, they're dying of poverty. We can contain it, we believe, we hope, with our doctors, nurses, hospitals and systems in Madrid and in Texas. But they don't have that. To stop it, the world has to do what the English and what the British are doing, sending in some brave boys who will set up instant hospitals, I guess, try and contain the area.
The World Health Organization says that this week the death toll will be over 4,500, with 9,000 people contracting the virus. Health workers will be hit particularly hard. More than 400 have been infected with Ebola and 236 have died. However, the organisation says it hopes to be able to declare Senegal and Nigeria Ebola-free later this week.
Our data shows that cases are doubling every 4 weeks. The disease is still widespread in Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone, and there is persistent transmission of the virus.
The world might have woken up to the threat posed by Ebola, but there is still so much that is needed here in West Africa. Dan Rivers, ITV News.
In America, an official from the Dallas hospital where 2 nurses contracted Ebola has admitted mistakes were made in their treatment.
One nurse has already died from the virus. The other was transferred today to a specialist unit. But as our correspondent Robert Moore reports from Dallas, there are even concerns about that.
Wearing a bright yellow protective suit, ill but able to walk, Amber Vinson was guided up the aircraft steps. An exercise in extreme caution after the many blunders of recent weeks. Even if some are questioning why this man with a clipboard appeared unprotected. The 29-year-old nurse has been transferred to Atlanta for further care, with the debate still raging about why she had so recently been allowed to fly on a passenger plane. This Dallas hospital acknowledged it first misdiagnosed and then mishandled the first patient, Thomas Duncan. Top doctors long promised America was ready for Ebola.
We have no doubt that we will stop it in its tracks in Texas.
Good morning, Today exclusive.
But nurses who dealt with the case tell a different story.
It was just a little chaotic scene. Our infectious disease department was contacted to ask, what is the protocol? And their answer was, we don't know. We're going to have to call you back.
Live from the heart of Texas, this is the Chris Crock Show.
In Dallas, popular talk radio shows are fueling the anxiety.
Everyone is saying that there's going to be more. So the idea that this is contained and this is over is not true at all, and this is an absolute disaster.
WB, if you hold, please.
Listeners are responding by demanding more than resignations.
I agree that somebody needs to be criminally prosecuted, but I think it's the people at the CDC. This is why these people should be going to jail.
Those very people were in front of Congress today. But first, via video link, came a profound apology from the hospital.
Unfortunately, in our initial treatment of Mr. Duncan, despite our best intentions and a highly skilled medical team, we made mistakes. We did not correctly diagnose his symptoms as those of Ebola, and we are deeply sorry.
Back in Dallas, the decontamination teams are still at work, with everyone left wondering whether Texas has seen the worst or glimpsed just the start. Well, it's now been confirmed that the remaining patient here, Nina Pham, also known as nurse number 1, will be transferred from this hospital to a specialist unit in Bethesda, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. I think here everybody recognizes this has been a public health and a public relations disaster, but less talked about and probably more significant is how valuable a lesson this has been, teaching really everybody around the world that however sophisticated your medical infrastructure is, really when it comes to the Ebola virus, nothing beats a good preparation and excellent education.
OK, Robin Moore in Dallas, thank you. And you can see the full story of how Britain is preparing to fight one of the world's deadliest diseases, and that's tonight here on ITV at 7:30.
On David Cameron's orders, the Tories flooded into Rochester today, hoping strength in numbers will halt UKIP's advance. The Prime Minister's plan is that he and all of his MPs will visit the Kent town at least 3 times before next month's by-election. And they're talking tough on immigration. Our political correspondent Robin E. Weeks reports from Rochester.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Morning. Are you worried you could lose this? If he is, he wasn't saying. But the fact the Prime Minister is here already, over a month before the by-election, says it all. Fresh from one kicking at the hands of UKIP, he really can't afford another. So no surprise he promised tougher negotiations with the European Union over immigration.
Crucially, we need to get some changes on one of the very big issues in British politics today, which is immigration. Now, it's not going to be easy. These things are never easy. But frankly, I think that Britain can say, as a country that has contributed massively to European prosperity and progress, that we should have one last go at negotiating a better deal.
The Tories fear that UKIP stand a real chance in Rochester and Stroud, their newest defector dismissive of his former boss's pledge.
Well, we've heard promises before on immigration from David Cameron and the Conservatives, and I remember at the last election we together promised that we were going to cut immigration from hundreds of thousands a year to tens of thousands a year. Unfortunately, they weren't keeping that promise, and that's a key reason why I moved over from the Conservatives to UKIP.
In the town's pubs, evidence the Tories should be worried.
Well, I'm all for giving UKIP a chance, to be quite honest.
If the Tories brought in a new policy, a tougher policy on immigration, would that convince you to stick with the Tories?
Possibly, depending if they lived up to their word.
I think it's probably quite healthy to have a party like UKIP that kind of making the Conservatives have to work a little bit harder to get people's votes.
In Rochester, they certainly are working hard.
The
Hello.
Prime Minister and the
Yes.
Chief Whip here on one day. You're
Yes.
throwing everything you've got at this.
We're certainly taking this campaign seriously. We think it's really important that we have an opportunity to reach every voter in this constituency.
The Lib Dems and Labour are also fielding candidates, but this by-election has become a battle royal over whether the Conservatives can halt UKIP's march. There wasn't much detail from the Prime Minister on what he might be asking for on immigration, but the reference to one last go at renegotiating with the European Union was clearly intended to be a hint that if he doesn't get his way, he could yet back an out vote in any in-out referendum. That would be a big turnaround for the Prime Minister and an indication of just how far UKIP is changing Tory policy.
Romilly, thank you.
1,200 cancer patients treated at East Surrey Hospital have been told they may have been wrongly treated. The hospital has written to the former patients of Paul Miller, a consultant urologist who has since been fired after an investigation found 27 people suffered serious harm under his care. From Surrey, here's our health correspondent, Lewis Vaughan-Jones.
This is Dr. Paul Miller, a consultant with 21 years' experience. But colleagues became concerned about his methods. An investigation discovered people were harmed while under his care.
There's a variety of harms, there's a variety of patients, but the spectrum of harm is side effects from the treatment that they've received right through to disease progression.
The doctor treated cancer patients here at a hospital in Surrey. The review found he didn't offer people the full range of options available, which meant some potentially suffered unnecessarily. Between 2006 and 2013, Paul Miller treated 1,200 bladder and prostate cancer patients at East Surrey Hospital. Each of those cases was reviewed, and 27 people were found to have suffered serious, significant harm. 5 of those 27 have since died, although it's not clear whether the treatment they received contributed to their deaths.
I mean, I was completely appalled. You know, this is a doctor who owes his patients a duty of care.
Solicitors are now acting for some of the patients affected.
Side effects that include incontinence or impotence, and some of those risks are quite high, and patients should be informed of those risks. I have clients who are investigating the possibility that their incontinence is associated with the treatment that Dr. Miller has given them.
In a statement, Paul Miller said, "I am extremely disappointed that the Trust has decided to dismiss me. I strongly do not believe that this is justified. I welcome the opportunity to cooperate with any investigation." The General Medical Council is now looking into his conduct, and legal action from some patients is expected. So it seems this doctor preferred just one treatment method, and that may have led to some of these problems. And there are 2 further concerns this evening. One is the timing of all this. Concerns initially raised back in November last year, yet the public only hearing about it now. And secondly, this isn't the only place where he worked. At least one other hospital is also carrying out an investigation.
OK, Lewis Vaughan-Jones at Redhill in Surrey, thank you.
The Archbishop of Canterbury has told ITV News the recent rise of so-called Islamic State in Syria and Iraq is a once-in-a-millennium threat to Christianity. Justin Welby praised the Muslim community in Britain for courageously speaking out against IS, but urged more leaders from all faiths to do the same. He's been speaking to our international affairs editor, Raghi Omar.
Rarely in modern times has an Archbishop of Canterbury been so clear in condemning an extremist group. Talking to ITV, Justin Welby said all religious leaders had a duty to speak out on confronting IS and its ideology.
I do think it's the duty of religious leaders to speak about this, to say this is not right. We need to take away any pretended, supposed and false justification for religious violence from those who are perpetrating it.
It was the dramatic images of Yazidi Christians in Iraq fleeing for their lives in August in the face of an IS assault that shocked the world. Justin Welby says the threat Christians and other minorities face in the Middle East is the worst in nearly 1,000 years.
This is an extraordinary once-in-a-millennia threat. It's that we are calling for peace, for mutual respect, and for space for people to exist where they've been for 2,000 years. That is at the heart of it. That whether it's the Yazidis or whether it's Christian groups or other minorities, they need the space to live out their lives in peace and for there to be no compulsion in their religion.
There'll be many people in Britain asking whether Muslim leaders in this country have been bold enough in the way that you have of condemning IS. Do you think they have?
The ones I know have been extremely bold. And I can't say how much I admire their courage, because it's much harder for them than it is for me.
British military advisors are already training Kurdish fighters to make them more effective against IS militants. And as the Archbishop was speaking to ITV, the government announced it is boosting its military effort by deploying drones in northern Iraq. Raghi Omar, ITV News.
Still to come on the programme, the footballer convicted of rape and the row over whether or not he should resume his career.
And the Queen's tribute to the dead of the First World War at the Tower of London's remarkable display of poppies.
I think you could see on her face the emotion that was coming through, and when she was presented with the wreath, she was very impressed with the way it looked.
Those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. The Deputy Prime Minister today waded into the row over whether convicted rapist Ched Evans should return to a career in football with former club Sheffield United. Nick Clegg, the Member of Parliament for the city's Hallam constituency, said the fact that Evans would become an instant role model to youngsters should weigh heavily with the club's owners. Paul Davis reports from Sheffield on a player who's divided opinions.
Before his fall from grace, Ched Evans was the young goal-scoring hero of a famous old football club. A rape conviction changed all that. He has served his prison sentence, so should he now be welcomed back at Sheffield United? No, say 150,000 people in a petition that claims a man who raped a girl too drunk to consent is no role model. Today, Deputy Prime Minister and Sheffield MP Nick Clegg had his say.
Rape is an incredibly serious offence. It is. Unbelievably serious offence, right? He's done his time, but I just don't believe that the owners of the football club can somehow wish away the fact that that has happened.
This veteran United fan says he'd understand if the club decides it doesn't need the negative publicity, but...
It certainly wouldn't put me off coming in, it certainly wouldn't put me off bringing kids to the game. If he scored a goal and I was here, would I cheer? Bet your life I would.
Other footballers have returned to the game after being convicted of serious crimes. In 2008, Plymouth Argyle's Luke McCormick was jailed for causing death by dangerous driving, but is now back at Plymouth where he's captain. The same year, Wigan striker Marlon King was jailed for sexual assault, but has since played for Coventry City and others, before being jailed again this year for a driving offence.
If you're not someone that they deem to be good, they're not giving you a second chance. But if they think you're someone of value, then you will probably get a second chance.
With Ched Evans due to be released tomorrow, the club insists no decision has been made yet about his future. Manager Nigel Clough says it's an issue above football, one that will ultimately be made not by him, but by the club's owners. Paul Davis, ITV News, Sheffield.
Well, the number of rape cases recorded by police in England and Wales is at an all-time high. New figures reveal more than 22,000 cases were reported in the year to June, and that is up 29% from last year.
And Ed Miliband has promised to give first-time buyers priority for new-build properties if Labour wins the election. Party plans to build 200,000 homes a year by 2020 to ease the UK's housing crisis.
Now, it was another turbulent day on the global stock markets as fears grow about the health of the global economy. After slumping by almost 2% this morning, the FTSE recovered to finish the day, trading just 0.25% down from where it started. Our business editor, Joel Hills, is here. They're very jittery, aren't they? Why?
They are. Another day of upheaval on the international markets. It sounds a very remote and distant event, doesn't it? But it does affect us very directly, from the value of our pensions, of course, all the way through what we pay for diesel and petrol at the pumps. So this is worth taking a note at. And essentially what we've seen today is a continuation of what we've seen over the last few days. Take a step back the last few months. The FTSE 100 has been on the slide since September. Oil prices on the slide since June. Governments have seen their borrowing costs bounce around. Greece in particular, it became much more expensive for their government to borrow money. The anxieties are manifest. They're manifold. The world is a pretty unsettled place at the moment, but we can see what's happening in the Eurozone. Concern that the 18 countries collectively might be sliding towards recession recession and that prices may soon be falling. Forget inflation, we may have deflation, anxiety in China and the US. The Greek finance minister said the markets are often nervous and excessive. He's right, of course. Let's hope he's right this occasion.
All right, Joel Hills, thank you. And finally, the Tower of London's unique Poppy Memorial to remember those killed in the First World War has already attracted thousands of visitors. And today it was the turn of the Queen to give it her royal seal of approval.
Surrounded by a sea of red ceramic poppies, she laid her own floral tribute to those who paid the ultimate sacrifice. Our royal correspondent Tim Ewart was there.
100 years ago, young men lined up here to volunteer to fight and die for their country. Today, the Queen and Prince Philip walked through the field of ceramic poppies planted in honour of British and Commonwealth troops who gave their lives in the Great War. It is an extraordinary sight surrounding the Tower of London, a project called Blood-Swept Lands and Seas of Red. A wreath was laid on behalf of the royal couple by beefeater Jim Duncan.
I think you could see on her face the emotion that was coming through, and when she was presented with the wreath, she was very impressed with the way it looked and the work and effort that people have put in. As you're walking through, you get the goose pinks, that feeling, and when you hear them tinkle in the wind in the morning, it's like Reveille, and like everybody's been waking up.
700,000 of these poppies, that's more than have actually been planted, have already been sold. That's £17.5 million. Each poppy is sold for £25, the proceeds divided between 6 military charities once costs have been deducted. The planting goes on, a labour of love for an army of volunteers. There will eventually be 888,246 poppies, one for each life lost. They will all be picked and posted to their buyers after Armistice Day on November the 11th. Tim Ewart, ITV News at the Tower of London.
Stunning.
Amazing.
Now, here's Mark Austin with what's on tonight's ITV News at 10.
On tonight's programme, righting wrongs in football. As the world's first black professional player is honoured with a statue, we report on the lack of ethnic minority faces in Premier League boardrooms. And what was it about this photo, one of 6, that meant it was chosen for the Beatles' famous Abbey Road album? Those stories and more at 10.
Well, I hope you'll join Mark and me later, but from the two of us and all the team here,
bye-bye.